Hi, this is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. So today it's snowing and the snow has frozen. It's certainly not the best conditions to have a tropical greenhouse. However, as I watch the money fly through the roof, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about one of the most beautiful houseplants that you can possibly grow. This is at Begonia Luxurians, and I think it really is well worth the money. It might cost about £2, £3, £4 maybe, and I've had it a couple of years now since it was a tiny little sprig of a leaf, just one single leaf, and well, you should have a look at it now. So let's get started. And we are in. Okay, so let's just take a moment to appreciate this, because this is about as good as it gets in terms of certainly my growth for this plant and how it looks. The blooms at the moment, they're not exactly going over. A few of them are dropping off. I think it's mostly the pollen from the stamens that's coming off. But this is the palm leaf begonia. That's one of its common names. And of course, its species name is Begonia Luxurians. So just have a little close-up look at what you actually get with this plant before we talk about some of its care needs. So we'll start off with the blooms. So we've got, at the moment anyway, we've got 2 sprigs of blooms. That one up there and the one that you've just seen. They start off with these really tight little balls, little white balls, very tightly packed, and then they open up into these beautiful little things, probably not that nice on their own, but when they're in a cluster like this, you've got the lovely little yellow stamens full of pollen if you get your nose too close, and to top it all, they are fragrant. So that's something that I certainly wasn't expecting, but these are fragrant blooms. You've also got on the leaves these lovely palm leaves, you've got the red in the centre, and you get these tiny little leaflets which are quite unusual. The newer foliage is kind of a darker green than the older foliage, and you also get in the centre the stems can be like a purpley yellow, little bit of green in there as well, but you've got all sorts going on there. And my plant at the moment is just over 1 metre tall, but I have pruned it back. So this is a species begonia that is native to Brazil, and although I'm growing it in a tropical greenhouse, my temperatures in here are minimum of 15 degrees Celsius. I did have it at 18 last year, but for now it's 15 as I'm trying to cut back on the costs a little bit. You might be able to hear the fan in the background. I can't turn that off because of the freezing cold temperatures outside, and obviously I don't let it fall much below 15 in here. So this really is a statuesque plant. I've seen plenty of people growing them outside in the summer. They treat them like a summer bedding plant. They may well take them in over the winter months, but it certainly won't survive outside over the colder months of the year if you've got like a frosty climate. So is it easy as a house plant? Well, although I'm not growing it in the house, I think it actually suits the house better than it suits my conditions here in the greenhouse. Now the reasons for that will become apparent as I talk you through some of its care requirements. So my plant here currently has 3 stems, as you can see down at the bottom there. It started off with one, it was one single stem, and the reason it's come up with another stem is because I've pruned it. Because if you prune it, all you simply do is cut it just above a leaf node, and you can see there in fact that we've got some new growth coming from that leaf axis there. There's a couple of new leaves coming there, and that is as a direct result of me pruning the top off to try and bush it up a little bit and try and prevent it from going as tall as it can do, because they can actually grow up to 2.5 meters tall. Very statuesque, very statesman-like plant to have anywhere really, either in the garden or in the house. Certainly gives you that tropical look, and I've actually seen very few in bloom, so this was a real surprise. I bought it for the foliage, as very often people do with begonias, and the blooms can be a really nice surprise. So this is one of the cane group type begonias for obvious reasons. It's got a cane structure to it, and as far as temperature goes, I've personally only had it down to 12 degrees Celsius. However, I found that at that particular temperature over several months, it starts to lose its leaves. Even now, this one is getting a few yellow leaves, as you can see there, and the reason for that is that it's dropping below 15 degrees, or that's more or less what I'm keeping it at. It really wants to be higher, and this is why I say it would be better off in a house. It really wants to be 18 degrees plus. It will actually even take down to 3 or 4 degrees, but I expect you'd lose all the leaves at that point and it would act more like a deciduous plant. It may then hopefully come back again once the temperatures increase. But for my money, really you want to keep it roughly at room temperature. Anything lower than that for a prolonged period of time, and then it will start to act as if it's in some kind of dormancy and it will shed those leaves. As far as potting media goes, I've got it in like a peat-free general purpose compost with added perlite. It's not really that fussy. You can put it in a John Innes number 2 or a John Innes number 3. Just give it a little bit more drainage in there just to make sure that it doesn't get too waterlogged. It prefers to dry out through waterings, but if you then leave it for too long in that dry state, it will wilt. The whole thing will completely flop over. However, all is not lost, providing you get to it in time and you give it a good water. It will then rehydrate and the whole thing will start to become rigid again, which is absolutely wonderful as a recovery mechanism because it means you've not lost it if it wilts. So I found that in the summer months it wants quite a lot of water. So if I leave it a day or two when it's quite hot outside and therefore hot in here, I do find that it needs watering practically every day. Now if you can look at this here, I've got quite a big plant and it's not in that big a pot, so maybe if I repotted it into a larger pot it might not need quite as much watering. All I will say is that you've just got to be careful that you don't leave it too long. There are ways around that. I've seen people actually put them in a little tray of water, but again, you've got to be careful with things like that. You don't want to leave it too long. You don't want those roots rotting off. But it will work as a temporary measure if you want to reduce your workload a little bit. I also have it on a capillary mat, which I don't actually use in the winter time, but during the summer months I'll have a little bit of capillary matting, like a strip there that goes into a reservoir that then keeps the bottom of the pot moist. In order for that to work, you need to have a flat bottomed pot, and you don't want any drainage at the bottom of that pot, otherwise you won't get any capillary action. You want something like moss at the bottom of the pot, and then you will actually cut down quite significantly on your watering. But even then I still find that every so often I've got to top water it just to make sure that those top roots are getting some moisture as well. As these actually grow in the understory of the Brazilian rainforest, they prefer a slightly acidic water, so you're better off using rainwater if at all possible. Try to avoid tap water. So as far as pests are concerned, I have had rather a deluge of slugs this autumn time, and the slugs have completely avoided the Begonia Luxurians, which is nice to know. However, I do believe that it can get spider mite, mealybug, aphids, and I believe it's also susceptible to powdery mildews. However, I have had none of those issues whatsoever. I suspect if you do get something like that, it would be easy to spot and you would just treat it like you would for any other plant. As far as humidity goes, they're used to 50% and above, right up to 100% humidity, as you'd expect coming from a rainforest. But I would say you're not going to get many issues, providing it's not below 50% for a great length of time. In the greenhouse here, I'm very rarely below 50%, so I've had no problems whatsoever. I would say though, if it's in the house and you do get those low humidity levels, avoid misting it. It can cause all sorts of problems. I have a video which I'll put up as a card over there somewhere, which will show you all about humidity and how you can increase yours if you have it low in the house. Now I've actually got mine staked, which also helps with keeping it rigid. The characteristic of it actually wilting when you've left it too long, the staking will to some degree help with that. You can tell just by looking at the leaf. You don't have to wait for the whole thing to flop over in order to stake it. It's a good idea to stake it. As far as fertiliser goes, they do enjoy a feed, especially through the growing season. Any general purpose fertiliser, whether it's pellets, whether it's a liquid feed, I just put some pellets in the top of the pot and that seems to last for the entire season, and then I do it again in the springtime. Now, like many begonias, it's not a highlight plant. It does particularly well in a shaded area. Now, when I say shaded, you know, there's shaded and shaded. You want to give it as much light as you possibly can, provided it's not direct sunlight, especially not through glass. So that's the kind of situation we're looking for. At the moment I have grow lights on it, not specifically shining on it, just generally close by, and it's been fine. And in fact, I've had it in about 3 or 4 places in the greenhouse and it's been perfectly fine in all those places. It's only been the temperatures that's made the difference, certainly not the lack of light. Now, like all begonias, they're very easy to propagate. You can propagate them from dividing rhizomes if it's a rhizomatous type begonia. This one isn't, it's a cane type begonia, but you can take tip cuttings, you can take stem cuttings, you can just take a leaf if you want to get a little bit more into it. Probably one of the easiest ways is just to take a tip cutting from, just as it sounds really, the top of the plant, the end of a branch. Take a tip, something like about that size, about 10 to 20 centimetres, and just simply remove the bottom leaves. Make sure it's got some leaves, preferably smaller ones. If the leaves are too big, just snip them down a little bit, just cut them, reduce them in size by about 2/3, and that will be enough. You can stick that in a small glass of water and that will root in no time at all. You could of course just put it in some general purpose compost with added perlite too. You can see here how I've actually done the same thing with this Begonia Connie Boswell. I've got a stem cutting there where I cut just above a leaf node, and that one's rooted away perfectly well. That one's quite a small leaf. This one, because it was a larger leaf, I've cut it in half just to reduce that water loss, and that was simply a leaf with the leaf stalk, and that too will root. They just love to root. They throw out their own hormones. Hormone rooting powder may well help, but they do it easily enough anyway. They're a little bit like Tradescantia in that sense. They want to root. So there it is in all its glory. I hope I've covered everything there. And if you think there's something that I've missed off, if you grow this plant, please put that in the comments. I'd love to hear from people. And if you think there is a nicer, more striking begonia than this one, put that in the comments also. I'd love to see perhaps if there's something that I'm missing out on. If you have any questions, ask away. And if you like begonias and you're interested in some other information on begonias, I have this video I'm going to put up right now, which I think you should go and watch. And for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.